Our scientific power is just exploding, right? And with it comes some really, really tough moral questions about how we handle human life from its very first spark to its natural end. In this explainer, we're going to dive into a specific ethical framework, one that's rooted in Catholic teaching, to see how it tackles these massive challenges. Let's get into the core principles that shape this viewpoint and see how they stack up against modern science.
This one sentence, it really gets to the absolute heart of everything we're talking about. It's the central conflict. I mean, just because we can do something with technology, whether it's creating life in a lab or editing our own DNA, does that automatically mean we should? This is the question that kicks off every single moral evaluation within this framework. Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of things like IVF or gene therapy, we've got to understand the logic behind it all. This entire ethical structure is really built on just two foundational principles. You can think of them as the pillars holding everything else up. And here they are, side by side. First up, the dignity of life. This means that human life is absolutely sacred and untouchable, from a single cell at conception all the way to natural death. No exceptions. Second, the nature of procreation. This one's about the idea that the act of creating life and the act of expressing love in marriage are fundamentally, inseparably linked. According to this framework, pretty much every specific moral judgment we're about to discuss flows from one or both of these core beliefs.
So what's the source of this dignity? Well, within this teaching, life isn't just seen as some biological process. It's considered sacred because it's believed to start with, and I'm quoting here, the creative action of God. What that really means is that no person can claim total ownership or control over another's life, not even at its tiniest, earliest stage, because life itself is understood to be a gift.
And this quote really drives home that second principle. It's saying the act that expresses love and union and the acts that can create new life are two sides of the same coin. So to intentionally pull them apart, say using technology to create life outside of that union, is seen as breaking a fundamental God-given connection. The belief is that procreation should always be the fruit of a personal act of love between spouses.
All right, so we've got our two pillars established. Now let's see what happens when we apply them directly to modern reproductive technologies. This is where the theory meets the reality of a 21st century clinic.
Based on the principles we've just laid out, this framework considers certain procedures to be morally illicit, or not okay. This includes things like in vitro fertilization, or IVF, and also surrogate motherhood. The core reason? It's argued that these technologies don't just assist the marital act, they completely replace it. They separate the creation of a new life from the physical union of the parents.
Now, the crucial point here isn't just that technology is unnatural. It goes much deeper. It's about control and dignity. When conception happens in a petri dish, you're essentially entrusting the life and identity of an embryo to technicians and doctors. This, the teaching argues, establishes a domination of technology, where a new human person is treated more like a product to be made than a gift to be received.
And this leads us to a really critical point, the status of the human embryo. If an embryo is created through technology, what do we owe it, morally speaking? Well, within this framework, the answer is clear. An embryo is considered a human person from the instant of conception, and because of that, it demands unconditional respect and the full protection we'd give to any person.
This chart really breaks down how that plays out. Freezing embryos, or cryopreservation, that's seen as gravely illicit because it puts them at serious risk of dying and completely removes them from the natural process of gestation. What about embryo reduction, where extra embryos are eliminated? That's viewed as a form of intentional selective abortion. And finally, pre-implantation diagnosis, using genetic screening to pick embryos, that's condemned for promoting a eugenic mentality, a mindset where lives are chosen or thrown away based on their physical qualities.
You know, the ethical questions don't just stop at creating life, they definitely extend to altering it. So let's zoom out a bit and look at the challenges from genetic engineering, because the very same principles of human dignity apply here too.
This framework makes a super clear distinction. On the one hand, you have somatic cell gene therapy. You can think of this as a form of medicine. It's trying to cure disease in one specific person, and the changes don't get passed on to their kids. That's considered morally okay. But then you have germline therapy. This alters a person's DNA in a way that is heritable. It gets passed down through all future generations. Because of the huge unknown risks to humanity's gene pool, that's considered illicit.
And on human cloning, the rejection is absolute. The argument is that it completely demolishes the link between procreation and the marital union and is an offense against the dignity of the person. Beyond that,
The teaching warns it could subject a cloned individual to a kind of biological slavery, where their genetic identity is completely predetermined by somebody else, undermining their uniqueness. So in our final section, let's see how all of this comes together. This isn't just a random collection of rules. The goal is to build a consistent life ethic that applies the same core principle, the inviolable dignity of human life, to a whole spectrum of issues, from beginning to end.
This slide really connects the dots. That same principle that protects the embryo is exactly why procured abortion is considered the direct killing of an innocent person. It applies at the other end of life too, where euthanasia is called a false mercy. And it even extends into public life, arguing that people have a moral duty to resist laws that permit these acts by using conscientious objection.
This quote gets right at the relationship between this moral framework and civil law. From this perspective, a law is only seen as legitimate if it upholds the fundamental right to life. So, if a law is passed that authorizes abortion or euthanasia, this teaching says it's unjust, and it actually stops being a true, morally binding law that citizens have to follow. So we end right back where we started, with a massive question. As our technology keeps redefining what's possible, who draws the line between serving life and dominating it? Now, the framework we've just explored offers one very clear, principle-based answer. But as technology continues to accelerate, giving us unprecedented power over the very building blocks of life, that question, well, it remains one of the most pressing challenges of our time.